Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore and have a collection of over 700 videos on monster ecology, fantasy world history, character classes, and magic items on my channel. If you like what I do, please consider becoming a member of the channel by clicking on the join button below or backing me on Patreon, where you can get access to all of the scripts I write for the videos, as well as being a member of the Secretive Gluminati on the Discord server, which has been optimized for personal play. And of course, subscribing to me here as I upload at least twice a week and have a live stream every weekend. Slightly different video this week. I'm going to be talking about the Orbs of Dragonkind, but instead of me just giving my opinion on them, I'm going to read directly from the Book of Artifacts and read you the actual whole article on the Orbs of Dragonkind, because it's a really good one, and also they're quite important objects, and I think they're a very good example of what artifacts can be and how you would integrate them into a campaign. So without further ado. The Orbs of Dragonkind, said to be 12 in number, are all similar in appearance. The major difference in each is its relative size to the others. Unless the orbs are compared to each other, it's virtually impossible to know which orb is which. Each orb appears as a sphere of finest crystal, perfectly smooth and lustrous. A close examination of each shows faint lines of writing etched into the surface. The language is ancient, no longer known by any speaker left alive. The writing on each orb is different. The orbs are usually found mounted on 3-armed stands. Each stand is different for each orb, but since the stands are not part of the artifact, they are no help in identifying each of them. The stands are normally of precious metals and elaborately made, although at least one looks like crudely wrought steel. When an orb is used, it glows with an internal fire that matches the colour of its dragon type. The Orbs of Dragonkind are not the same as those found in the Dragonlance campaign. Those orbs are unique to that world. The history of the orbs is one that delves deeply into the beginnings of the worlds, so deeply indeed that the very origins of these great artifacts are matters of mystery and confusion. In part, the tale depends on who tells it. In the beginning, as with all beginnings, everyone agrees, the age was long ago, barely moments beyond the great creation, although how and who made the world is another story all disagree upon. At that time, all things lived in their truest forms and shapes of strength and power. Man had not yet been sundered into warrior, priest, and mage. The leader of men was the mightiest of all three of those. The elves were the greatest masters of the arts and did not live away from all others. Dwarves stood as tall as men and did not hide themselves beneath the earth. Each race was great in its own way. The greatest of them all were the dragons. There, at least at the beginning of all things, the dragons were the majestic rulers of the world. Their kind were all wise and all-knowing. Later they would change, forgetting their speech, forgetting their mysteries, forgetting the goodness of their spirits, at last forgetting their duties to the newly created world. But for now they were not fallen so. The dragons were great and ruled over all things. This is all that the tales agree upon, for here is where each race remembers the greatness of the past differently. Who can say which is right, if any are right? In the poems of the human bards, the tale continues in treachery and woe, and it goes like this. The human version. Over the misty years, the dragons ruled the worlds, and as they did, they slowly changed. They cared less and less for the welfare of their subjects and demanded more and more from them. The dragons grew proud. Some became evil, while the rest grew indifferent to the suffering they caused. The voices of the people cried out for relief, but the dragons heard them not. So the people turned to their gods and pleaded for guidance. The gods were not deaf and could not stand the sorrow in the voices of their children. In the way of the gods, they called upon the least of their children, a swineherd in a small village at the base of the great mountain where the dragons dwelled. Go and teach the dragons to respect the might of their children, they told him in a dream. Now, the swineherd was a good man, but he was afraid. After all, he was only a mud-spattered peasant. The dragons, well, they were dragons. What could he possibly do? Terrified to face them, he did not go. 6 times the gods called upon him, and 6 times he hid himself in fear. Finally, on the 7th time, the gods revealed themselves in anger, and the swineherd could no longer refuse them. Trembling with fear, he began to climb the mountain to confront the dragon lords. For 12 days and 12 nights he climbed, and each night one of the 12 great powers came to him in a dream. Each whispered to him a secret long hidden from the dragons, a secret that gave the poor swineherd power over his inhuman masters. Perhaps it was the secret of their true name, for in those days true names held power. Perhaps it was the secrets of flattery by which he could trick the dragons. Here even the human bards do not agree. It doesn't matter to the tales, though. Needless to say, the unnamed swineherd reached the mountain's peak and gained an audience with his dragon lords. There, no one knows what happened. For weeks he was lost to the human world, and his family began to despair. And then, one day, the swineherd returned at his door, as if by magic. With him he brought 12 crystal orbs. "The dragons have given us hostages," he told the people who gathered. "Hide these orbs, and the dragons will no longer rule us." At first they laughed, and the king of the land wanted to take the orbs back to his treasury, until the swineherd commanded the least of the orbs to strike down the greedy king and all of his knights. Then the people feared to disobey the swineherd and hid the orbs as he said. Thereafter the dragons ruled mankind no more. The swineherd prospered and became the king of his land. No rival would challenge him out of fear of the orbs, but never did the swineherd king use them again. Whatever secrets that they contained passed away with him. Of course, that's not how the elves tell it. Their story goes like this. In that time when all things lived in peace with each other, the noblest of the dragon clans came to the courts of the elves and said, "Shining elves, you are the light of all races, spreading grace and beauty throughout the world. Great is the pleasure you bring to all things with your voices. It is bleak and lonely in our mountain fastness. Will you make for us a reminder of your joy so that our days will not be so forlorn?" And the elves, being elves, agreed and asked for nothing in return. After 100 years and a day, enough time by which a man's memory would fail and he would fall into grave dust, but little to the elves and even less to the dragons, the high folk appeared before the council of the clan and presented their gift, 12 orbs of perfect brilliance and beauty. Each sang with a voice of lightest crystal, and the music of the stones tore at the heart of the great dragonkin. The orbs sang of gliding in the purest blue sky, of courting flights beneath the burning silver of the moon, the battles fought and lost by the brave, and the passings that would come. The songs wrenched at the very souls of the nobles, and they let their bodies waste as their spirits soared. At last, completely enchanted, each surrendered, letting their spirits be trapped by the orbs, where they have remained to this day. Such is the way of the elves and the gifts that they bring. Now the dwarves, of course, know that the elves and the humans have it all wrong. This is their story. In that time, the dwarves were the greatest of all crafters, even greater at the forge and the crucible than they are today, for many secrets have long since been lost. All other races knew of their skill, but only the dragons respected their craftsmanship. The humans were too foolish to know the power of iron and stone. The elves were too pretty and vain, but the dragons, who dwelt in the mountain homes, understood the might of rock and the magic it could bring. Thus it was that an embassy of 12 dragons sought out the great council of the dwarves. "O grand and wise shapers of metal," the oldest of the dragons spoke, "our people are scattered over the globe. We cannot call our councils or share news of birth and woe. We come to you for an answer, for there are not greater artisans to be found on the earth or beneath it. Will you make us a solution?" "What will you pay us?" demanded the high clan king of the council. "All the treasures from beneath the earth that lie in our hoards we will give to you," answered the eldest of the dragons. And the dwarves knew that they could make the thing that the dragons wanted, and the price was good. So they set their greatest craftsmen to fashion a set of 12 crystalline orbs for the dragonkin. After 12 summers and 12 winters, the orbs, 12 in number, were finished, and once more the dragons appeared before the great council. "Here are your treasures you asked for," said the high clan king. "Give us our payment as you promised." The dragons smiled and were pleased with the work. Taking the orbs, they said, "Give us a fortnight to prepare a feast. When the time is past, send your strongest, bravest, and cleverest to our caverns, and we will feast them and honour them with our riches." At that time the dwarves still trusted dragons, who were the rulers over all, and so the high clan king agreed. In a fortnight he led the finest of his people to the halls of the dragons. There they found the 12 ambassadors of the scaled race waiting. Looking about, the dwarves saw no tables, no benches, no feast foods, nor ale. The dragons crouched greedily upon their treasures, the dragon orbs clutched between their claws. "Where is our payment?" demanded the high clan king. "Here," the eldest dragon said, and at that word his people set upon the dwarves who, in trust, came with weapons sheathed. All were slain, until only the High Clan King remained, wounded and dying. With his fading breath he called out, "Hear your doom, treacherous beasts. The treasures you have stolen will have my revenge." With that he spoke words of power and the secret magics the dwarves built into the orbs, for the dwarves are ever a cautious lot. "From this day forward your scaled hides are cursed. Your children will be less than you, and all things will hunt you and call you dangerous. Greed and hatred of your own kind will fill your hearts, all until the price you promised is paid." At that curse the magic of the orbs seized all things noble from within the 12 ambassadors and pulled these into the crystal prisons. The body of each beast changed colours, and they feared each other. Screeching in rage, the now savage dragons fled throughout the world. So dragons have remained ever since, crouching on their hoards, keeping these treasures from their true owners, the dwarves. Any one of these stories might be true, or perhaps none of them. However they were made, since that time the orbs have surfaced time and time again throughout the world. Sometimes they've made kingdoms powerful, sometimes they've brought them down. Always dragons appear wherever the orbs are to be found. The orbs are rumoured to grant great powers, but always at a terrible price. It's unclear just how many orbs were made or still remain. The dwarven legend says a dozen were fashioned. Both human and elven stories are silent on this. There are tales of the destruction of 2 or 3 or more of these orbs. Tales of great heroism and danger. Orbs supposedly destroyed appear later in tales, so it's hard to be certain which is right. The researchers of Elamir the Sage on this point do nothing to clear up the confusion, although his dry and scholarly work, found in only a few exclusive collections, is the best authority on the orbs themselves. The Orbs of Dragonkind are among the more unusual artifacts of those described in the book. First, there are 12 of them, and 12 orbs is more than just a single item. It's unlikely that most campaigns can survive having all 12 orbs in play at the same time. Certainly the player characters should never have all 12 or even half that number in their possession at one time. Second, the dragons are and should be unique to a campaign, including their personalities and their behaviours. Since the dragon orbs contain the trapped personalities of long-dead dragons, the Dungeon Master should take the time to create dragon personalities that fit their campaign world. 12 suggested personalities will follow, but these are not the only possibilities. Finally, there is the matter of the powers themselves. The orbs are perhaps more valuable than any other set of items. In addition to the different personalities for each orb, which will affect how those powers manifest themselves, the orbs also differ from each other by age, level, and colour. There is one orb for every age category of a dragon, and each age category represents a different colour of dragon. The DM must match these 3 factors, age, colour, and personality, to create a mix of powers that best suits the campaign. When dealing with the number problem, the Orbs of Dragonkind will most commonly be used as individual items. The player characters find 1 or maybe 2 of the orbs and no more. This is the easiest solution. The Dungeon Master builds a major adventure that climaxes in the discovery, use, and or destruction of an orb. The existence of other orbs is hinted at, but the DM does not build adventures around these. For the adventure, the Dungeon Master should select carefully which orb will be used, both for the powers the orb will grant the character and for the personality of the orb itself. A number of storylines are useful for a small number of orbs. An orb may be needed to defeat a powerful dragon marauding the land, to give the noble but outnumbered forces of good in the kingdom the edge they need to overcome an orc invasion, or to perform a special spell needed to lift the curse that has befallen a player character or non-player character. A more difficult approach is to build a series of adventures that eventually uses all 12 orbs. The player characters might discover 1 orb, only to have it stolen by their evil foe. In order to overcome this enemy, the player characters must now locate an orb of even greater power. They track down and uncover a number of different orbs, starting with the least and rising in power, until the group at last finds the one they need. Of course, the task is never that easy, since the enemy, already in possession of 1 orb, has a head start on them and additional power on top of that to boot. The difficulty here is that almost every adventure must be greater than the last. Finding and using each orb becomes more and more difficult and heroic, although allowances can be made to slow the pacing at points. Some orbs may be monstrously guarded, others cleverly hidden, and still others may require the players to use wits and role-playing instead of muscle. Unless the Dungeon Master creates adventures with a great deal of variety, the players will quickly suffer from sequelitis, or look, it's just another Orb of Dragonkind. Yay. For DMs willing to go to great efforts, all 12 orbs could be introduced in a truly unique method. In this case, the Dungeon Master creates a special campaign world from the ground up that centers around 8 or so powerful kingdoms or various races. Each kingdom has its power center as one of the Orbs of Dragonkind. The logic of the world, the armies, the diplomacy, the relative strengths and weaknesses of each land revolve around those orbs. Kingdoms possessing lesser orbs might have to constantly struggle to hold off the more powerful neighbour, or band into alliances against them. Those with the most powerful orbs may be empires to which the lesser kingdoms swear obedience. The possessors of the orbs may be all evil, or they might be a mix of good and evil rulers. The Dungeon Master will have to define all of this background before beginning the new campaign. Once these details are decided, the DM can centre the action around the remaining orbs. Recovering one of the 4 that are lost will upset the careful balance of power in the campaign. Naturally, each king or emperor wants to claim the lost orb while denying the others their goal. Warfare, diplomacy, intrigue and adventure can all be played out against this background. The player characters may never actually find an Orb of Dragonkind during the course of the entire campaign, but the items will always have an influence over events. However the DM chooses to use the orbs, player characters should not be allowed to retain these items. Perhaps the best solution is to construct the adventure so that the player characters must recover the orb and place it in the hands of their king for a purpose, and for the protection of all. This gives the characters the satisfaction of success and removes the item from their control at the same time. Alternatively, dragons will naturally have a great interest in the orbs and may insist that the characters surrender any that they find. The characters may have to destroy an orb for safety's sake. And finally, there's always thieves to rely on. The Orbs of Dragonkind consist of 3 separate elements: colour, age, and personality. Colour will determine the choice of powers for each orb. Age sets the level of strength for those powers, and personality dictates how those powers can be revealed and used. Personality also affects the exact nature of each orb's curse. In addition to the powers that vary by age and colour, the orbs all have certain features in common, a natural result of being powerful magical items. Like all artifact items, these powers can be constant or invoked. Constant powers: anyone within 10 feet of the orb will have an armor class and saving throws and to hit bonus of the dragon trapped within the orb. This is calculated according to the age and colour of the trapped dragon. These individuals are also immune to the breath weapon attacks by dragons of that same type as in the orb. The personalities of the orbs are all telepathic to any creature within 60 feet visual range. The trapped personalities also possess full awareness of their surroundings, able to even to see invisible or otherwise concealed creatures as would a normal dragon of their size and type. Whether or not this information is communicated to others and the owner of the orb depends on the orb's actual personality. Each orb has invoked powers similar to a crystal ball to any other Orb of Dragonkind, provided the identity of the other orb's owner is known, so they can communicate with each other if they allow it. Invoking the correct command while touching the orb allows the owner of the item to invoke any of the following powers, all figured by the dragon's age and colour. Use the dragon's breath weapon 3 times per day. Radiate dragon fear 3 times a day. And if that dragon could cast any spells, so too can the owner of the dragon orb, casting any spells including special powers known by the dragon. Finally, and most famously, every orb allows the owner to use a domination spell against any dragon of the same colour within 100 yards. The target creature is allowed a saving throw against the artifact. However, the save DC of that artifact is based on the strength of the individual orb. Some of them are almost impossible to resist. The older the trapped personality within the orb, the greater the chance of success. If the orb contains an old red dragon, and the target is a juvenile red dragon, the saving throw will be with disadvantage on that juvenile, where at the other way around, the saving throw would be with advantage. The owner of the orb can dominate any number of dragons within range, but can only make 1 domination attempt per round. There is no limit to the number of times per day this power can be used. So the Book of Artifacts is a little bit dated. It's from the previous editions, and the trapped dragon within each orb has different colours. The choices are black, blue, brass, bronze, cloud, copper, gold, green, red, shadow, silver, and white. Now, all the colour powers must be invoked and are usable according to the limitations given in the description for each one. There's a little bit of conversion that needs to be done if you're going to bring this into 5th edition, so I'll make an attempt. The black dragon, this is a 12 hit dice dragon. Upon command, the owner can create an acid storm, so essentially acid rain that increases damage as it pours down. The radius of 100 feet around the orb. The storm lasts a number of rounds equal to the dragon's hit dice, so that's 12 rounds, and inflicts 1d4 points of damage for the first 3 rounds, 1d6 through to the 6th round, and 1d8 every round thereafter. So it gets worse and worse. The acid storm can only be conjured once per month, however. The blue dragon orb is a 14 hit dice orb. The owner can breathe a bolt of lightning that leaps from target to target, striking several creatures at the same manner as a chain lightning spell. A number of targets equal to the dragon's hit dice, so 14, can be struck, and each of them will take the equal amount of damage as the dragon's breath weapon, and this power can be used once per day. The 12 hit dice brass dragon, upon uttering the command, the owner triggers a sunburst spell from the orb. This power is usable once per month. With the bronze dragon orb, this is also a 14 hit dice orb, the owner of the orb can use, it's an old spell called Imago Interrogation once per month. So essentially you can contact the spirit of another creature whose name you know, and then you can interrogate that creature and ask it a number of questions. However, you can never reveal the location or powers of any of the other artifacts, or any artifact indeed. But you can learn all sorts of other stuff from that creature. It has to tell you the truth. For the Cloud Dragon Orb, 14 hit dice, by touching the orb, the owner is able to summon a 9th level Storm of Vengeance spell. Unlike the spell, invoking this spell only requires 1 round action, and the power is usable once per month, but it's a 9th level spell. For the Copper Dragon, 13 hit dice. As befit the Copper Dragon's impish nature, invoking its power triggers a powerful version of the Mass Suggestion spell. The Copper Dragon Orb, 13 hit dice. As befit the Copper Dragon's impish nature, invoking its power triggers a powerful version of the Mass Suggestion spell, except it affects everyone within a radius of 30 feet, and only those who have more hit dice than the actual Dragon Orb itself. So it would be 13 hit dice or more. So if your character's got 13 hit dice or more, then they're not affected, but anybody else doesn't get a saving throw. And other than that, it conforms to the normal rules of the Mass Suggestion spell. For the Gold Dragon Orb, this is a 16 hit dice. It's the most powerful of them. The Orb of the Gold Dragon has the power of command over others of its kind, meaning, in this case, all dragons. It can only be invoked once per year. Upon uttering the command, the orb summons to it a number of dragons equal to its hit dice, plus 1d6 additional dragons, so 16 plus 1d6. These dragons are the same age as the possessed gold dragon and can be any type determined by the DM. All must be summoned at the same time. The summoned dragons will serve the owner of the orb faithfully for 3d6 days. They will carry out their instructions to the best of their ability. However, the dragons will refuse any order that's clearly futile, suicidal, or hostile to dragons of their own kind. The dragons could be summoned to fight at the side of an outnumbered army, since the creatures themselves might turn the tide, but would not slay each other upon command, just to reduce the number of dragons in the world, for example. A red dragon can't be ordered to attack or harm another red dragon, but would have no qualms about tearing into a blue dragon. At the end of the period of service, the dragons are released from servitude. Unlike other summonings, these creatures called by the orb will not seek revenge upon the owner. To their mind, whoever possesses the orb has the right to place this duty upon them. However, should the being that called them ever fall into their clutches, little mercy will be offered. Evil dragons will most likely kill the offender outright, while good ones will impose some service for what is required. Green Dragon Orb, 13 hit dice. The power of the orb is only effective in a forest or wooded area. Upon command, a ray of vile green shoots forth up to 100 yards to strike a number of trees equal to the dragon's hit dice, so up to 13 trees. The trees touched are instantly polymorphed into shambling mounds, uncontrolled by anyone. The shambling mounds remain for 24 hours until they're slain, and this power is usable only once per month. The Red Dragon Orb, this is a 15 hit dice orb. The power of the Red Dragon's Orb is the most devastating of all the Orbs of Dragonkind and is only usable once per year. Upon uttering the proper command, the orb lances out a beam of energy straight down that penetrates into the very heart of the planet. Within 2d12 hours, the earth heaves and splits with the force of an earthquake spell. As the tremors grow, a volcano rises from the point where the magical beam struck. The volcano spews lava and ash, gradually rising into a mountainous cone over the process of weeks. The radius of the destruction is equal to the hit dice of the trapped red dragon. All normal constructions within this area, towns, roads, castles, etc., should be considered ruined. Magical structures, should any exist, are allowed to make a saving throw versus the crushing force to avoid annihilation. All temples are allowed to make a saving throw to avoid magical fire, to avoid ruin, and these buildings that survive become small islands of near stability along this mountain slope. The temple at the heart of the cone, for example, might be raised from the crater's rim and stranded on a pinnacle of rock. Further away, it might avoid destruction by having the lava flows part naturally around it, forming a bulwark. So it's pretty devastating. Most mages haven't seen mountains raised through magical effects since the age of the Netheril Empire. The Shadow Dragon Orb is 12 hit dice. The power of the Shadow Dragon is to draw upon the very essence of the plane of shadow. Once per year, the owner of the orb can cast a place on the prime material plane into the Shadowfell. The area of effect is a diameter equal to the trapped dragon's hit dice in times 100 yards. So the orb at the center, and when the command is given, the orb owner and the surrounding area, so that's 1200 yards, are whisked into the Shadowfell. The transported area remains there for 1 year, and at the end of that time is instantly returned to its proper place. The Silver Dragon Orb is 15 hit dice. The Orb of the Silver Dragon has great healing powers. Once per year, it can be used to resurrect 2d10 times 10 bodies within 100 yards. All the bodies to be resurrected must be present at the same time, but the orb can tell the difference between friend or foe, so you can select only allies to be resurrected, which is particularly useful for restoring a fallen unit on a battlefield. Finally, the White Dragon Orb has 11 hit dice. Upon invoking the power of this orb, all allies of the owner within 100 yards are seized by a savage war frenzy. They fight with a bloodlust that causes them to disregard their own peril and wounds in their savage attempts to slay the enemy. They basically gain the same bonuses as a barbarian's rage. Well, perhaps not that great for a player character group. This is actually really good for a battlefield unit, turning them into a terrifying force that just rips through the enemy. And this power is usable once per month. So the age categories of the dragons trapped within the orb and their personality also come into play. The age category basically determines how many additional powers that orb has. So for the least of them, a dragon hatchling, it will have 1 additional power, all the way up through Wormkin, Scaled, Dragonet, Drake, Serpent, Dragon, Gold Hoarder, Great Serpent, Fire Drake, Elder Worm, and the Eternal Dragon. So the Eternal Dragon has got 4 additional combat abilities, 3 additional immunities, 2 personal enhancements, 1 movement power, 1 elemental fire power, and 1 power from Fate and Fortune. So you can see that the age of the orb itself makes a huge difference. The personalities of the trapped dragons are important to create, and they give you a list of different examples. Each one of this is kind of an archetype. So first we've got the naive dragon. This dragon believes in the better nature of beings, even against all other things that have happened to it over the centuries. It's always had hope that some means to rescue it exists, and that it can be freed from the crystal one day. And so it naturally assumes that its owner wants to see it free, and uses this rationale as a justification for giving the powers that it possesses inside the artifact. The sullen dragon is trapped so long within the orb, this dragon knows better than to believe the lies of any master that owns it. It's stubborn and recalcitrant, refusing its powers whenever possible. No one deserves its aid, since no one ever intends to free it. Threats and trickery are the best hopes of invoking the orb's powers, although it will freely act if it believes the power commanded might actually cause its master some pain and woe. The tricky dragon personality is a spirit full of guile, constantly seeking a way to escape its prison through subterfuge. It will freely resort to lies and deception in order to obtain its goal of release. It can't, however, lie if an answer is compelled of it. The master demands to know if any invisible creatures are at hand. The orb must answer truthfully. It can and does invent powers for itself, often claiming to know things it does not in hopes of gaining its release. The patient dragon personality has taken the long view, biding its time for the day it knows will come. Until then it slumbers and thinks, creating elaborate philosophies and mental theorems. If not actively in use, it just sleeps and cares nothing for the world around it. When in use, it can't be hurried and will insist on using its powers at its own pace. It does take a certain delight in rousing a little panic in its masters. The impatient orb has a dragon that wants to get out now. It is long since tired of the confinement and will do nothing unless convinced the act will somehow move it closer to freedom. Its impatient surfaces even in areas having nothing to do with its freedom, and will constantly urge its master to stop waiting and act, and get it towards a place where it can get free. The curious personality relieves its boredom of imprisonment by seeking knowledge. It will want to know everything, especially when its powers are being called on. Its master may often explain the reason for its use, which may in turn lead to other explanations. Worse still, explanations will remind it of things that it has learned, leading it into long digressions and dialogues. The bored dragon personality is sealed inside the orb, never dying. This dragon feels as though it's seen everything. Little that happens to its master can interest it, nor does it care what happens to those who possess it. The orb will not respond to pleas of urgency or need, cares little for good or evil, and will welcome any grotesque event as a new experience to relieve its boredom. Getting the orb to use its powers requires trickery more than threats. The hate-filled dragon orb inside rages against those who have trapped it, those who have used it over the centuries, and indeed everyone on the outside. It's hostile to all three things, but in particular the master who forces it to act. Whenever possible, the spirit will seek to bring harm to its master by perverting the intention of words or luring him into a danger with some seriously bad advice. Like all of the orbs, it cannot directly lie about what it knows, but even so it can convince the foolish to get themselves killed. The despairing personality has just given up. The dragon inside it knows that it will never escape from its prison, and there's no point in trying. Promises, rewards, and threats mean nothing to it. All action is pointless. And there's even the thought that through inaction, there might be a way to gain release. Those wishing to use many of its major powers must actually convince the spirit that the outcome will have some meaning, either to make the world a better place or a worse place. The stoic personality is a dragon spirit that's resigned to its fate, but it's not given up. Instead, it tries to make the best of things while searching for an escape. Unable to help itself, it seeks to help its kin by demanding payment for its services or consideration for others of its species. The mad dragon personality, time has taken its toll on this dragon. Its out-of-body confinement has driven it insane. There's no predicting how it will react to any given situation. Sometimes it will be bright and cooperative, while at other times it will rave about nonsensical enemies. It will debate simply to debate, and will generally make life difficult for its master. And then finally, the desperate soul. This dragon is in a state of near panic at the hope of ever gaining its freedom. It will be willing to attempt anything, no matter how dangerous to itself or its master, to achieve that goal. If the deeds hold out some promise of freedom, it will slip from its master's grasp to fall from great heights, attempting to roll into acid pools, or leave itself exposed to powerful magical blasts, all in the hopes of shattering its orb. Now, it's said that, of course, every artifact, every one of the orbs has a dreadful curse attached to it, and this is true. The orbs have only the simplest of curses, but these are woefully dangerous. Since each possesses a dragon spirit, those who touch the Orbs of Dragonkind are immediately exposed to the risks of being possessed by that spirit, and they will try to transform the host into a dragon physically over time, so that they can then possess that body and exit the owner's soul into the void to drift forever. There are means of destroying the Orbs of Dragonkind as well. As with most artifacts, they have specific means that they can be destroyed. The first is that the dragon can be released by sacrificing oneself with the... basically, you imprison yourself inside the orb and let the dragon spirit free, so you take its place. Second is all 12 must be ground simultaneously under an other artifact, incredibly rare, called the Great Millstone of the Gods. And finally, the last way that they can be destroyed is the original makers of the orbs must be found at the beginning of time, and the secret of the orb's destruction must be learned from them, which is impossible. Please hit the like button if you made it this far, subscribe if you like what I do, check out my Patreon for some exclusive content, buy some merchandise, wear your geek with pride, and as always, thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you very soon.